This class is crazy. Hayato is one of currently 2 Sengoku classes in Maple that seemingly just excels at everything you can imagine, once you get them to 5th job. Lots of animation canceling, plenty of movement options, super strong, fairly simple bossing, skills that lock you in place for 8 attacks. This class has it all. Though they do get a lot of various attacks and may look a bit intimidating, remembering all their various tricks, it really isn't all that bad. So let's break them down, starting with all their skills as per usual. Right in the beginner tab, right off the bat, they have a passive for mobility, mastery, and level 30 willpower. Another passive that gives them more damage depending on how much defense they have, a bossing stance, and an ult? Already? Yeah, Summer Rain has 2 modes to it. The first attacks everything on screen and gives you a damage buff for 2 whole minutes, 2-minute cooldown. Switch to your quick draw stance and it becomes Hitokiri 100 Strike. It's the exact same as Summer Rain in damage, lines, mobs hit and all, but the key difference is Hitokiri's attack teleports you forward, rather than casts in place. Oh, one more thing. You also get this window permanently on your screen, which is your sword energy meter. The stats it gives goes up the more you build it up, which you do by defeating enemies in normal stance, or by attacking enemies in quick draw stance. Both stances also give different stats, which increase with more sword energy you have. Moving on, first job has, surprisingly, only 1 passive for strength and dex. The only other non-attack skill here is your flash jump, which can be used twice in the air. Now on to your attacks. Surging Blade is a slashy skill that attacks 4 times, sends you forward, and mobs enemies in your path. Shoryusen is a mobbing skill that sends enemies up into the air, and Bato Jutsu Advance is a skill that gets longer the more skills you unlock at later job ranks. At first job, it only uses Surging Blade and Shoryusen for a total of 2 attacks, but goes up to 8 total later on. It does increase your damage by 2% with every new skill used during it, as well as gives 8 energy per use, but it locks you in place until you go through all the skills. It can be cancelled by right-clicking it on your buff bar. Sanreizan is your basic mobbing skill, dealing 3 hits in a row with each click of the skill in succession. It also slightly moves you forward whenever your attacks hit an enemy. When you swap to quick draw stance, your skills change around slightly. Sanreizan becomes Blade Flash and becomes single target focused. Your flash jump becomes a horizontal dash, which can also be activated by tapping left or right twice. And you get a new skill that lets you flash jump while in quick draw, which can be used either by binding it to a new key or simply pressing jump twice. Second job gives a couple more passives, a basic weapon booster buff, an upgrade to Sanreizan, and an up jump. Vapor Blade can be used either on the ground or in the air, and simply sends you flying upwards and damaging enemies from your launch location. You can also activate it by pressing up twice, or if you don't like that, just right-click the skill so it only activates when you click it on a button. You also get another attack that launches enemies into the air, and Falcon Dive, which sends you up slightly and crashing down at an angle below you. Third job gets another Sanreizan upgrade, and a few more various passives, with this one restoring health every time you land a crit at a 40% chance, and this one being an enemy debuff that makes them take damage over time. Willow Dodge gives you a chance to boost your damage every time you dodge an attack, and stacks up to 5 times. Now for the attacks. Whirlwind Cut attacks enemies, sends them flying back if used with Shoryusen, and if you do so, it has a 100% crit rate. It also acts as a teleport. Sweeping Sword also teleports you, kind of, behind an enemy, and then sweeping back to where you initially cast it from, knocking back enemies within its path. Lastly at third, Dankusen simply dashes forward with a cut. It too also can be used after Shoryusen to cut enemies midair. Fourth job is where Hayato starts shaping up into a powerhouse. First off, look at all these passives they get. Damage reduction, damage increases, resistance increases, the standard Sanreizan upgrade, and a Katsuki trace. This passive is essentially a final attack-like skill, giving you an extra line of attack with Sanreizan, Blade Flash, or this new skill, Shinsoku. Shinsoku can only be used while in quick draw stance, but it's very simply just a big burst of damage once every 15 seconds. Let's get all these other attacks out of the way and explained. Tornado Blade swoops enemies around both sides of you, stuns them, and shoves them to whichever direction you're facing, 4-second cooldown. Sudden Strike does decent damage and places a party-wide debuff on enemies and bosses that makes them take 20% more damage for 30 seconds, 3-second cooldown. And Hitokiri Strike has two parts to it. The first part is an attack with 100% crit chance that also acts as a 3-second iframe and gives you a buff that increases your crit rate, 90-second cooldown. The second part lets you attack diagonally, both up and down by holding the arrow keys in the respective directions, slicing enemies it passes through, 6-second cooldown in between the angled ones. As always, there's also the standard Maple Warrior and Hero's Will, and lastly this toggle that deals damage to nearby enemies whenever you dodge their attacks. Keep in mind if you're changing channels around looking for a grinding map and you're standing near mobs, this toggle could potentially stop you from being able to change channels. Hyper skills start you off incredibly strong with Falcon's Honor. It attacks everything around you, gives 100 sword energy every use, and has an 8-second cooldown. This skill makes grinding on Hayato a breeze once you get it. Princess's Vow is the Sengoku equivalent to Epic Adventure, giving 10% damage to you and all other Sengoku classes in your party. So, just Kana or other Hayatos in your party. 1 minute duration, 2 minute cooldown. Your third and final hyper skill, God of Blades, is another buff, with this one giving you flat attack and resistances for 30 seconds, 90-second cooldown. Hyper passives for Hayato are fairly straightforward. You'll want every upgrade for Shinsoku. This is your main bossing skill, so it makes sense. Reinforce for extra damage, Extra Strike for an extra line of damage, and Boss Rush for extra boss damage. Next, Sudden Strike. It's not a skill you'll be using often for either damage or mobbing, as it's mainly used for debuffing bosses. Plus it also gets a little complicated with the 3-second cooldown. So Reinforce and Spread aren't really necessary. Extra Strike can be good for an extra line of damage, and if you have no other hyper passives you want, this one's a fine enough choice. Lastly, for Hitokiri Strike, you'll want Cooldown Cutter, which reduces the cooldown by 30%. Not for the diagonal part though. Extra Strike is fine enough too if you liked using this attack diagonally often, but there's better options in my opinion. Persist makes the crit rate buff last 20 seconds longer, which is nice if you rely on it to be at 100% crit rate, but you can safely ignore it if your crit rate is high enough. Fifth job is where Hayato gets its true, fully fleshed out playstyle, mainly from 2 new attacks, so let's explain those first, starting with Iaijutsu Phantom Blade. You finally get to put the points of your sword energy meter to use by simply clicking Iaijutsu every time you have at least 200 energy. When you do, a big attack whips out in front of you, hitting a ton of enemies with a ton of lines, about 3/4 of a screen width away or so, with huge damage. No cooldown, and every time you use this skill, you gain a final damage buff that lasts for about half a minute, and this buff stacks up to 5 times. At max level, that final damage buff at max stacks gives 115% final damage. Since the skill can be refreshed infinitely, this is your most important 5th job skill to max out by far. Instant Slice is very simply just a big, heavy hitting attack that makes a cool effect on your screen. It hits a ton of enemies, and its hitbox is very large. 10-second cooldown. And now the Bato Jutsu skills. Bato Jutsu Zanku, first and foremost, is an iframe throughout its entire duration. Second, it also does a ton of damage and instantly gives you 700 energy whenever you cast it. Third, it can only be used when there's an enemy to hit with it. Its only downside is it locks you in place for the entire animation, but there are ways around this lock that I'll get into later on in my animation canceling section, which you can find by skipping around in the chapters of this video. It should be after the Made Easy section. 90-second cooldown. Bato Jutsu Ultimate Will summons a giant Blade God at the cost of 150 energy that stays stationary and hits all enemies that come in contact with it for 30 seconds. For each enemy it kills, it gains 8 sword energy, and on bosses, each hit gives 10 sword energy and does more damage. Either way, it can only accumulate a total of 800 energy. At the end of its duration, it does one final hit and gives you all the sword energy it accumulated while it was summoned. 2-minute cooldown. Hayato's shared nodes are wacky strong. Both of them. First, Princess Sakuno's Blessing is the Goddess's Blessing type skill for Sengoku characters. 1 charge built up every 4 minutes, holds up to 2 charges, and when used it initially gives you a fat chunk of final damage, which periodically keeps raising throughout its duration, up to a cap. It also ignores 1 debilitating abnormal status per use. Sengoku Force Assemble summons a bunch of characters from Hayato's storyline, randomly selected from this list throughout its duration. Once out, they just keep attacking around you. They all have slight additional effects too. Apologies in advance for these pronunciations, but Uesugi Kenshin ignores enemy defense, Tsuchimikado Haruaki makes you take less damage, Ayame increases critical damage, and Takeda Shingen gives a pretty big attack and magic attack buff. 30-second duration at level 1, going up to 45 seconds at max level, and 2-minute cooldown at all levels. Both these Sengoku shared skills are crazy strong and part of your main burst. Don't neglect either of them. And now finally, the shared warrior nodes are also both pretty good. Weapon Aura builds up 1 charge every 3 minutes, up to 2 charges, and when used, sends a wave of energy flying out of you every 5 seconds when you attack. It also increases IED and final damage. Impenetrable Skin gives you super stance alongside a ton of status resistance, and when you get hit, your damage increases by 6% each time you're hit. At level 1 this only applies 3 times, but at max level it applies up to 6 times. 2-minute cooldown. Hayato has some confusing at first glance skills, but in my opinion they're currently one of the lowest risk, high reward classes in all of Maple. If you're not sure how, allow me to explain by making them easy. First of all, keep in mind you get a ton of lifesteal through your 3rd job skill, Warrior's Heart, just so long as you keep landing critical hits. With just Unfaltering Blade from 2nd job and Hitokiri Strike's 45% crit rate buff, that means without doing anything else, you get 85% crit rate. Making up that final 15% should be easy enough through Link skills or Legion. Even with decent Sharp Eyes, that's 10% extra crit rate right there. Remember to maintain your extra damage buffs, such as the one from Summer Rain / Hitokiri 100 Strike, by simply just clicking them. In addition to Summer Rain / Hitokiri, there's also Iaijitsu's final damage stacking buff, your sword energy meter's passive stats from having more energy, sudden strikes increase damage debuff while bossing, and also normal Hitokiri strikes crit rate buff if you're not at 100% crit rate yet. Pre-5th job, your main skills for grinding would be Sanreizan and Falcon's Honor when you hit hyper skills, plus any other attacks you have at the time that you're comfortable using. The combo attacks with Shoryu Sin are fine enough too. However, once you hit 5th job, that all gets thrown out the window. Falcon's Honor is still a good large area attack though. It's kinda funny how easy grinding on Hayato is once you hit 5th job. Watch this. Yep, that's all you have to do. Find a map with a layout you're comfortable with, go to one side of the map and place down summons like Batojutsu Ultimate Will and Urta Shower. Then go to the other side and use Instant Slice, Falcon's Honor, and or Iaijitsu Phantom Blade back and forth. Cooldown hats also have a decent use for grinding, lining up the cooldowns of these skills with the mob respawn timers. The more cooldown you can get, the better it lines up, but even just a -2 second hat helps. Same with the Threads of Fate cape, Wings of Fate, which gives an additional -1 second to cooldowns. Cooldown hat is mainly super useful for grinding, though it can also, as of New Age, be useful for bossing, with how Shinsoku is now on a cooldown. Until you hit 6th job and then Shinsoku gains 3 charges, then that doesn't work anymore. Speaking of bossing, the main thing you'll want to be doing here for your off burst is swapping to quick draw stance, debuff the boss with sudden strike every 30 seconds for extra damage, and spam Rai Blade Flash along with your 3 main short cooldown skills whenever they're off cooldown. Those 3 being Shinsoku, Instant Slice, and Falcon's Honor. Iaijitsu Phantom Blade is good to use periodically too, whenever your energy reaches at least 200, but keep in mind to save at least 150 of it whenever you're ready to use Batojutsu Ultimate Will for your main burst. That, and remember to maintain 5 stacks of it, at least using it once every 33 seconds for that juicy final damage buff. I'll get more into what to do during your actual burst in the burst/BA section as usual, but for now, animation canceling. Animation canceling is pretty important for a lot of Hayato's flow for both attacking and movement. In short, you can cancel all your longest animations, except normal Hitokiri Strike for whatever reason. Most of these cancels all stemming from one singular skill, Instant Slice. All you have to do is click whichever skill that has long animation, and then click Instant Slice at any point during said long animation. The timing is not tight whatsoever, just quite literally remember to press it as you're locked in place. This is most useful on skills such as Hitokiri 100 Strike, Summer Rain, or Batojutsu Zanku, which is most importantly used as one of your main burst skills. Pretty much every long animation attack you have, except base Hitokiri Strike, can be cancelled with this. Back to Hitokiri 100 Strike for a brief moment. While you can cancel this with Instant Slice, it's better to cancel it either with Blade Flash or Sudden Strike, so you still have Instant Slice up and ready to be used right after. Though remember, you have to use either of those before casting 100 Strike, not after. For mobility cancels, namely up jumping with Vapor Blade, you have a few skills that cancel that long jump animation. I'll keep it simple and say Surging Blade is the best for animation canceling your up jump, both in normal and quick draw stance. It just works for both stances without issue, at the cost of taking up an extra button on your keybinds. Once you cancel the animation, you can use another skill right after, or simply flash jump to safety. A slower option for canceling up jump would be simply using Sanreizan/Blade Flash. It at the very least lets you flash jump after the animation stops, and doesn't take up an extra button on your keyboard, but it is quite slow and limits your options. While in normal stance, and only in normal stance, Shinsoku also animation cancels up jump, but in my opinion it's a bad habit to get used to this one. This is because when you swap to quick draw, you might develop a slight muscle memory for clicking that combination instead. Certain bosses can be broken out of their animations when they're in the air, most notably during Damien's fireballs and dive, and Lucid's lasers and touch attacks. Though keep in mind the attacks still play out in full, so be careful. Lastly, one neat little trick. Surging Blade normally has a slight delay every time you cast the fourth attack in its string. The way to get around this delay and go right back to using Surge Blade is to simply not just click it a fourth time. Yeah, that's it. You wait like a quarter of a second or so while the third attack is out, and then go back to clicking it 3 more times and repeat that on loop, and you'll just never be stopped. While this list of animation cancels is incomplete, I'd say the ones I included in this video are the most essential ones to keep in mind to help make Hayato flow all their attacks and movement much more naturally and smoothly. This class is chock full of various cancels that either keep being discovered or removed, so play around with it and see if you can further revolutionize this class. You know what link skills are like for Hayato? Yeah, the same as every other class. For grinding, the usual suspects that look like Evan, Mercedes, and Aran links, and Lara if you needed a bit more normal enemy damage, and then whatever else you want to toss in there, usually other damage dealing links. A spread looking like this should be fine enough. For bossing, focus more so on damage and boss damage links, like Lin and Demon Slayer. Toss in a crit rate link or 2 if you need that, and then fill in the rest with other damage links. Along the lines of this is good. As always, resistance link. 8 whole seconds of invincibility every time you revive in a boss fight. Incredibly useful so you don't keep chain dying and wipe out quickly. I will always recommend this. Inner ability has a few options for choices nowadays, more so with the preset update for 2 extra IA slots to swap between, but more or less it's in line with a lot of other classes' IAs. First line, you'd want boss damage, for dealing more damage to bosses obviously. Cooldown skip is another option for first line, but ever since they updated Shinsoku to be a charge skill at 6th job, it's a lot worse now since it can't skip its cooldown once you get it there. The only other notable skills it could skip are Falcon's Honor, Summer Rain / Hitokiri 100 Strike, and AB Link. Nothing at 5th job or above, which is where a lot of your damage comes from, so yeah, stick with boss damage for the first line. The second and third lines, you'll want any mix of abnormal status damage, flat attack, or buff duration. Buff duration is mainly good for a longer AB link, so you get to do your burst with a bit more damage. Abnormal status damage is good because Hayato has a few debuffs you'll be placing on enemies frequently, and flat attack is just good for everything. While attack speed is needed to spam Blade Flash in bosses, it's unnecessary to get it as an IA line because you already hit the attack speed cap with Booster, Quick Draw Stance, Decent Speed Infusion, and Monster Part Green Potion. For settles, or a second IA mainly for grinding, the typical drop and Meso are pretty good, along with normal monster damage. Trinodes time! If you're planning to main Hayato, you'll want a setup consisting of 2 Shinsoku, 2 Sanreizan / Blade Flash, 2 Hitokiri 100 Strike / Summer Rain, 2 Falcon's Honor, and 1 filler skill, which most commonly is Sudden Strike. Prior to 5th job, these are your main skills you'll be using for everything you do. If you just want Hayato as a boss mule, it's roughly the same skills, but just remove Falcon's Honor and the filler skill, so you instead have 2 Trinodes looking like this: Shinsoku, Sanreizan, and Hitokiri 100 Strike. Falcon's Honor does help with boss damage, but it mainly helps a lot with grinding, so it's the safest to drop from the Trinode setup. For Burst/BA, make sure you have 5 EI Jutsu Phantom Blade stacks first and foremost. It's your biggest damage buff. Next, make sure you have at least 150 sword energy, and that Eye for an Eye is toggled on. Pop your non-cooldown buffs, and then your cooldown buffs, such as Weapon Aura, Princess Sakuno's Blessing, and Sengoku Force Assemble. Will skill can be used here too if you have it. Place down Bato Jutsu Ultimate Will, and attack for a little bit with Blade Flash, and also Falcon's Honor, Shinsoku, and Instant Slice anytime they're off cooldown. Though also keep in mind to save Instant Slice for this next section. Pop Impenetrable Skin and God of Blades for their buffs, Sudden Strike for the enemy debuff, a B-Link, and expend all your Phantom Blades available. Once Ultimate Will expires, use up all your Phantom Blade uses again, and use Bato Jutsu Zanku, then Hitokiri 100 Strike, then Instant Slice to skip both their animations. Then, expend all your Phantom Blades once more, and keep using Blade Flash and all your other useful skills off cooldown. Shorten down, 5 Phantom Blade stacks, Toggling buffs, Weapon Aura, Will Skill, Sakuno's Blessing, Sengoku Force Assemble, Bato Jutsu Ultimate Will, attack for a bit, Impenetrable Skin, God of Blades, attack some more, Sudden Strike, a B-Link, all available Phantom Blade uses. Once Ultimate Will expires, use all your Phantom Blades again, Bato Jutsu Zanku into Hitokiri 100 Strike into Instant Slice, Phantom Blade a bunch again, back to attacking, and using everything off cooldown. The Hayato Discord also provides timers for when to use all this, mainly to prep up Sakuno's to get as much damage as you can when the time's right, and lining up when Ultimate Will expires, which is why you delay your burst ever so slightly. At 6th job, your burst also changes ever so slightly when you unlock Hexa Shinsoku, because then you have to save all 3 of your Shinsoku charges at least 45 seconds in advance, in preparation for using those during your origin skill. Otherwise, yeah, just pop everything you got, maintain your 5 Phantom Blade stacks, and hit them all with your big skills once you can animation cancel. I'm fairly new to side maining my Hayato, but they've extremely quickly became one of my favorite classes in this entire game. They got just about everything I want in a class, and upon writing this guide I just doubled my knowledge of how busted you can make them. My Hayato also just so happens to have a name I love too. I nabbed the name a few years ago because I like Samurai Champloo, and I wanted to name her after my favorite song from that series, Aurorian Dance. Anyways, thanks to the Hayato Discord for having a ton of information on this class, detailing out a bunch of sick tricks that make Hayato like at least 8 times more fun to play, and thanks to you for watching my guide. If there's more classes you want to see me cover, or even other MapleStory related videos, leave some suggestions down in the comments. If you just like my videos and want to support the channel, consider subscribing to the channel. Not many people asked for a Hayato guide, but I felt like doing it anyways because I've been having a ton of fun with them recently. Next guide will almost certainly be one y'all want to see from me next. I have ideas of what that might be, but you might be the one that changes my mind on what to go over next. That's all.